Despite the conventional profile of serial killers as lone nuts driven solely by their own internal demons, there's a compelling case to be made that many of the most prominent serial killers are, in fact, intelligence assets. Countless serial killers appear to be subject of mind control programs like those found in Project MKUltra, exhibiting telltale qualities such as early childhood abuse, dissociative disorders, pedophilia, and connections to known or suspected intelligence fronts, like the military, prisons, mental hospitals, and cults, as discussed extensively on this channel. Many of these murders, far from being random killings, are actually targeted assassinations or cleanup operations on behalf of various criminal enterprises, like murder for hire, drug trafficking, or sex rings, which the killers are often associated with. Other murders have no political motive but fit the profile of satanic cult killings or a domestic version of the Phoenix program in Vietnam, brought home, aimed at terrorizing the public into submission. While this is no doubt a controversial position to take on serial killers, there's often an astonishing number of common elements in serial killer cases pointing to some kind of government/intelligence involvement. The serial killer presented to the public is often a fall guy taking responsibility for group actions or, on rare occasions, an entirely innocent patsy.
But there are things that happen in this world that we wish didn't happen, and your book certainly catalogs an awful lot of them in the very recent past. And what's shocking, almost as shocking as the things that are in your book, Dave, is the fact that most of us just don't know that this stuff is going on. When you did this research for Programmed to Kill, how did it affect your perception of the world around us?
It had a significant effect on me, actually. It was kind of a difficult psychological transition to kind of make to, come to grips with the fact that this stuff really is going on out there. I'd been digging, progressively deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole for many years, and my view of the world had changed considerably even before that. I spent like 4 years actually working on that book, put a considerable amount of time into it, and so basically I was wallowing in that material for a period of several years, and it required a major adjustment. I went through some troubling times, trying to sort of psychologically come to terms with it. It's almost like waking up one day and realizing that up is down and black is white, and your whole world is just sort of turned upside down. It's difficult for people to grasp just how dark things really are out there.
It's like being the lead character in that Rowdy Roddy Piper movie, They Live. You put on the glasses and you realize there are monsters all around you, and you're the only one who sees them.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it even harder because you kind of feel like you're all alone out, and veering into some very strange waters without a co-captain or something, It's
not the kind of stuff you can bring up at polite dinner parties.
No, it doesn't really go over well at Thanksgiving dinner, So it takes quite an adjustment, really, in your whole sort of outlook on life and on the world that we live in, and just how sick and twisted it really is.
Five of the most prolific serial killers in American history were all operating at the same time.
John Wayne Gacy's
Ted Bundy is still alive.
BTK.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Green River Killer.
For years, the Green River Task Force has chased the ghost of a killer too diabolically clever to catch.
There were a number of detectives who truly believed Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer. But certainly we did not have the evidence to move forward with prosecution.
Our guest this afternoon is author Dave McGowan. His book is called Programmed to Kill. Dave, the title, we touched in the first segment about on mind control experiments. Am I right in assuming that that's where the title Programmed to Kill came from?
Yeah, basically it came from a quote by an attorney whose representing Bobby Joe Long, who happens to be a cousin of Henry Lee Lucas. That's another weird thing that I found is that, you know, you find these weird connections, like Robin Gack led what was known as the Ripper Crew, who, you know, carved up some women. He was a former employee of John Wayne Gacy. He worked for John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was, you know, a general contractor, basically, and he hired a lot of young, you know, teenage kids to work for him. He was one of the ones that worked under John Gacy, and then he goes on, you know, to lead his own serial killing cult, you know, so there are these weird actual connections between, you know, the serial killers themselves that are kind of weird. But your question was the title of the book, real quick. An attorney for Bobby Joe Long came from a statement that he made in court, which was, from the moment of birth, this man was programmed. He actually said programmed for murder, and I changed it to programmed to kill. That's where the title came from. That's obviously an allusion to the MK Ultra type mind control conditioning.
My mother had told me that the only thing she ever prayed for herself was to die peacefully in her sleep. And that's the one thing she did not get.
The whole kind of mythos of serial killers arose, at least in part, to you know, to write off a lot of politically motivated killings as just sort of random acts of violence. That's certainly the BTK killer case. That was absolutely at play there. You know, the first victims, his first alleged victims, were a family, a military family, an intelligence guy who had, you know, told his son that he felt he'd been targeted, and he'd given his son instructions on, you know, what to do should anything happen to him and all. I mean, this was a guy who knew that his life was on the line, and he was deeply involved with intelligence operations and whatnot, and sure enough, the whole family got wiped out. And then, you know, they sort of tacked on these other random killings of women that had absolutely nothing to do with the initial taking out of this family. I mean, the entire family pretty much was taken out. And, you know, the surviving son has said that he just doesn't buy the single assailant scenario. That just absolutely would have been impossible. You know, his father was a trained commando. You know, he knew martial arts. He had weapons in the house. His wife was a judo instructor. The two kids knew judo. They had a guard dog on the premises that everyone agreed was vicious and fiercely loyal, would not have allowed anyone in that house that, you know, he didn't think belonged there. And, you know, the kid had said, there's just no way that one guy walked into my house and took out my whole family. There's just no way that could have happened. My dad, you know, was on the lookout to begin with. You know, he was already looking over his shoulder. He was a tough guy. The rest of the family was trained. You know, they were armed. There's no way. So, you know, there's no question that family was basically taken out in some sort of paramilitary operation, and then they later just tacked on the deaths of all these women with completely different MO, had absolutely nothing to do with it, and said, oh, look, this is just a string of serial killings, that's all it is. So yeah, that's certainly one of the motivating factors behind the whole serial killer phenomenon, is that it allows politically motivated killings to be just sort of, you know, swept under the rug, and nobody takes another look at them because, you know, they're just random acts of violence.
Well, I confronted the family, pulled a pistol, confronted Mr. Otero. There I realized that I didn't have a mask on or anything. They already could ID me, and made a decision to go ahead and cut him down, I guess, or strangle him. I had never strangled anyone before, so I really didn't know how much pressure you had to put on a person or how long it would take.
Initially, the Bright murder was not associated with the Otero killings. There were not a lot of similarities in the method of killing. The strangulation that was used at the Otero house was different than what you found where Kathy was stabbed, and that's what resulted in her death.
At the crime scene at the Oteros, the telephone line was cut, and there had not been a sign of a struggle. And at the Bright scene, of course, there was a struggle as Kevin fought back, and they turned furniture over. And the phone in the bedroom had been unplugged, but Catherine Bright was found clutching a telephone receiver in her hand. She just wasn't able to make the call.
All these projects, these sexual fantasies also.
Potential hits, in my world, that's what I call them.
I see it as being basically, I guess you could say, a psychological warfare tactic, very much along the lines that terrorism is used. It's a vehicle of sorts for instilling fear in people. It's become more and more apparent, particularly over the last several years. It's all about control through fear. I mean, that's the basic operating principle of our government and most other governments as well. You strike enough fear into people, and they're going to run to Big Brother for protection. We see that with terrorism now, the way that serial killers do. It's very much sort of a created phenomenon that is used as a vehicle for social control.
All I would have had to do was just stop for several months at a time and space it out. But it didn't happen that way. I just was driven to do it more frequently and more frequently. Couldn't control it anymore.
It was a bizarre delusion that he thought that he could take the skulls and the bones of victims and create a power center in which he would be able to get special powers.
Did you feel by keeping the skulls, and if you would have actually accomplished this shrine, that you would have felt less lonely, like you were being kept company?
Jeffrey Dahmer, there was a strange little story about him, about how he went to Washington, D.C. on a high school field trip when he was like 17, 18 years old. Went with his class on a trip, and he ducked into a phone booth at one time and made a call, told his friends that he was going to arrange a private tour of the vice president's office for them. And, they were naturally skeptical, thought he was full of shit, but he made the call, and sure enough, he got him in not only just to a private, visit to the vice president's office, but also to a private visit to the office of a very high-level columnist, Washington columnist at that time. And these are the kinds of things, these little tidbits of information that you will find in these people's stories that are never explored. They're just kind of tossed out there as sort of sides and never followed up on, and no one gives any significance to them. But, it's quite obvious that your normal average Midwestern kid going back to Washington, D.C. on a visit cannot make a quick phone call and secure a private tour of the vice president's office. That doesn't happen in the real world. This guy obviously had some kind of high-level family connections, And there were other indications as well. And Gacy would definitely have high-level connections. He was actually once photographed sitting side by side with Rosalind Carter at the time that she was First Lady. And he can be seen wearing a lapel pin that signifies that he has a very high-level Secret Service clearance. And, parts of his police file were blacked out with the notation that it was FBI matter. And, there was all kinds of these little... he claimed friendships with the governor of Hawaii and the attorney general, and this guy was connected politically, quite well connected politically, and that's a fact that's usually just completely brushed over in the biographies of him. And it's very common, Ted Bundy, same thing. You look at a lot of these people, and you will find that there were in fact unexplained connections that these people had, people in high levels of power.
On the day of his baptism, John Wayne Gacy was executed that same day. It was a full solar eclipse as well. Some try to read into that, well, there's some kind of a mystical meaning behind all this.
It actually began in the late 60s, early 70s in the San Francisco area. There was just sort of this explosion. We didn't even have in our vocabulary the term serial killer until it was coined by the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit in the early 70s to, explain this sort of explosion of these people. Before that, they were, very few and far between. You had your Albert DeSalvo, you had your Jack the Ripper, but they were few and far between. They weren't like a part of our daily diet, so to speak, until like the late 60s and early 70s, and it really sort of burst forth from San Francisco, which was, probably not coincidentally in those days, sort of an MK Ultra city, sort of the whole Haight-Ashbury district, I think, was like an open air MK Ultra operation.
The specter of the marauding serial killer had become a relatively common feature on the American landscape. Reactions to these modern-day monsters range from revulsion to morbid fascination. Fascination that's either fed by, or a product of, the saturation coverage provided by print and broadcast media, along with the dizzying array of books, documentary films, websites, and movies of the week. The prevalence in Western culture of images of serial killers and mass murders has created in the public mind a consensus view of what a serial killer is. Most people are aware, to some degree, of the classic serial killer profile. But what if there's a much different profile? One that has not received much media attention at all. In Programmed to Kill, The Politics of Serial Murder, author Dave McGowan takes a fresh look at the lives of many of America's most notorious accused murderers, focusing on the largely hidden patterns that suggest that there may be more to the average serial killer story than meets the eye. Think you know everything there is to know about serial killers? Or is it possible that sometimes what everyone, quote, knows to be true isn't really true at all?